Everyone's rolling in here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jenny Riggenbach, CEO of the Community Foundation, and I am joined by John Harry, the Executive Director of the Portage County Historical Society, Nancy Page, who's one of the trailblazing athletes and coaches that we're going to hear from today about an exciting new exhibit at the Historical Society, and Shelly Johnson, who is one of the exhibit committee members and another stellar athlete who I know a little bit about her pickleball enthusiasm, so I'm sure it goes much deeper than that. But really, thanks to everyone for joining us. What we're going to talk about today is this Women in Trailblazers exhibit at the Portage County Historical Society is going to be launching this summer. But before we get started, I want to just let everyone know that we are recording this, and you're going to be able to find a link that we'll share to a YouTube page in case you want to share this with anyone else who wasn't able to join us today. And I'd like to start by thanking our sponsors, the UWSP MBA program, which has been sponsoring us since we started, as well as our corporate convening partners with the foundation, the Delta Dental Foundation and the Century Foundation. So thanks to all of you for making these possible. So I want to get started by first congratulating John and the Portage County Historical Society, who was just learned that they are going to be awarded the Nonprofit of the Year award from the Portage County Business Council in April. So congratulations to you. We're so excited for you.
Thank you.
Maybe just a great way for you could just kick us off, John, and tell us a little bit about the Portage County Historical Society and how you came to the organization.
Yeah, we're in a huge period of growth with the Portage County Historical Society. The society was founded in 1952, so that means we turned 70 years old last year. And in 2021, the organization made its biggest growth as far as personnel goes in a long time, in that they hired an executive director who's me. And so up until that time, the foundation that's been laid by the volunteers of the Historical Society and the board of directors has been phenomenal in getting, we have historic sites, we have over 500,000 documents, photographs, and artifacts, all telling different parts of the story of literally us. So, I don't think people often think of themselves as historical figures, but when it comes down to a historical society at a county level, we're literally focusing on the story of you and how you came to be. And so I was lucky that the organization, and still am lucky that this foundation has been set for success into the future. So I've been here since 2021. Prior to this, I was a radio DJ for 10 years, and then pretty much did a 180 career-wise. And so went back to school and got my master's at UW-Milwaukee in public history. And then I also, because of my experience being on the board of directors with the Historical Society before going back to school, I got a grad certificate in nonprofit management. So I'm really happy that I'm here. My wife and I, this is our third time living here in central Wisconsin, and we're never leaving. It's just truly the best place to be from our viewpoint.
It definitely is, and we're thrilled that you're back, and we're thrilled that the Portage County Historical Society has hired you as an executive director. It's been really fun to see the growth of the organization since you came on board, so thanks for everything you do. For those that might not be really familiar with the Historical Society, could you talk a little bit, John, about all the different sites we have around the county?
Yeah, well, sites and programming. So because we do have 4 different sites, and maybe I'll cover those last. But we do a wide range of programming. We have monthly programming. One of a grant we actually got from the Community Foundation helped us facilitate free monthly programming. It's a different historical topic every month. We've had everything from the history of the public library to unincorporated communities. Next week, I'm giving a talk on prohibition in Portage County. So it's great to have partners like the Community Foundation to be able to do things like that. We also do a variety of different tours. We do a downtown Stevens Point walking tour in the summer, so getting geared up for those again, as well as historic Point brewery tours. So these are not your average Point brewery tours, and so we go deep into the brewery's history to talk about how the brewery came into being. And then we do pub crawls too. So you can see that the last two I talked about cater toward a certain audience. But yeah, and then like Jenny said, we have 4 different historical sites. So the 2 that are in Stevens Point, one is the Beth Israel Synagogue Museum on Water Street, and that's open right now, the second Saturday of every month until we get to summer, and then we'll figure out a new schedule. And then we also have Firehouse number 2, which is on Strongs Avenue. See, that one's buried in a neighborhood, but once you find it, you'll be like, I had no idea this is the oldest municipal building at Stevens Point. And then we have the Rising Star Mill in Nelsonville, which has a great art show on Memorial Day weekend coming up. And that's the big fundraiser and awareness event for that site. And then where I am right now is Heritage Park in Plover. And this is kind of our big historical site in that it's a whole city block here in Plover. It's 11 historic sites, or excuse me, 11 historic structures. So each telling different pieces of county story. So everything from circuses to transportation to education and everything in between. So that's also where our feature exhibit space is in the what is known as the Old Plover Methodist Church, but it's our main exhibit space. That's a building that was built in 1857. And it's a great space for exhibits. It's wide open, and that space has been undergoing a massive amount of renovations, getting it ready for this exhibit so that we can really be proud of and put our best foot forward when we have exhibits in that space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that overview. I think a great segue to talking about this exhibit. So in celebration of 50 years since Title IX was enacted, the Women Trailblazer exhibit, it's going to be telling the story of women athletes in Portage County. Shelly, can you tell us a little bit about the exhibit and how it came to be and how you got involved?
I can. The exhibit is titled "We Just Wanted to Play," which, if you follow the history of Title IX, takes you back to when girls were not allowed to play. They sometimes were allowed to cheerlead, and they were sometimes allowed to get together in the gym after school when there weren't boys' teams practicing and goof around. Nancy will tell you more about that. This exhibit showcases high school athletes from all of the high schools in Portage County and our university athletes. It's amazing to us in this small Midwestern locale how many unbelievably successful female athletes we have produced. And this exhibit covers the trailblazers like Nancy, who were currently, or who are currently here and were at the onset of Title IX. And it goes through those Portage County athletes who have hit the world stage. Roisin Willis, for one. It takes you through the All-American athletes. It takes you through athletes who have excelled in high school and in college. It takes you into the coaching. And last but not least, into those youth organization, sports organizations in our county that have sometimes become the first step into female athletes for their first foray, if you have, into sports in general. I'm told that the exhibit was a brainchild of Tim Siebert and the late Antone Andy, who wanted to do something with female athletes. And because of Title IX's 50th anniversary, it seemed the most logical place to start. Sue Kale, if you want something done, you go to Sue Kale, and that's what they did. And Sue created a committee of coaches, athletes, community people who would go out and research. And that's what we've been doing for the last year. We have found so many things that are going to be showcased in this exhibit that are so unique, and extremely interesting.
Very cool. So what do you hope some of the big takeaways are?
The bottom line is we are hoping that not only can we inspire young female athletes as to what's out there, what potential they have, but where they came from and the women who led the way for them to be where they can compete today.
It's so true, Shelly. And I think about, I turned 50 last year. When I think about what has happened just over my lifetime and not even realizing it until you really have a moment like this, an exhibit like this to reflect on. I went to the event that you hosted to kick off some of the fundraising to get this exhibit going, and just inspired to be reminded of how much has changed in 50 years as a result of so many people like Nancy, who we want to hear a little bit from. So Nancy, one of those Title IX trailblazers that's key to this exhibit, you're one of those people. Can you take us back to 1973 when Title IX was enacted, and where were you, what were you doing, and what was happening in women's sports at that time?
Well, Title IX was enacted in 1972.
72.
Okay. And nothing much happened here in Wisconsin at that time. Everything was just kind of the same. And nothing happened really until 1989. So 17 years went by without any really sizable changes. And that was because one of the universities filed a lawsuit claiming that, nothing's been done. Title IX has been here for 19 years. And so that's when things really started going. We plotted. I coached field hockey, but I had to referee my own games. Wow. Which is unheard of these days.
Nancy, that was field hockey at UWSP?
Yes.
Okay.
And it took a long time to get things up and running. We had very little money and not a lot of support from administration. I remember going into the vice chancellor and saying, we don't have enough money to do our programs. And he said, well, I don't have any more money. I can't help you. And I said, well, does the university have a lawyer? Well, just like that, we had money and we got things going. So it just took a threat, I think. I don't remember the date, but it was, well after Title IX was enacted.
So when did you start coaching, Nancy?
I started at Point in 1973.
Wow. As a coach?
Yes, as a coach.
And of always field hockey, or did you coach other things too?
I started out in field hockey, and then the university added softball. So they made me the softball coach. Now, I wasn't really qualified to be the softball coach. And what made our program so successful was the athletes. They were terrific, and they were just really anxious to get going and compete. So let's see, I lost my train of thought. Where am I going with this?
You were just telling us about what it was like to be a coach and being asked to coach.
Well, and we had to raise money, so we did fundraising. We sold Portage pizzas. We sold candy. We sold all sorts of things just to get enough money to operate. And, when you look back at it, that was really very unfair. And facility-wise, the men always had priority, regardless of whether we were in season or not. I remember having an indoor softball practice in Quant Gym, And the men's basketball coach came in and said, you people need to leave. And so we left, but it turned out that it was just for a shoot around. They weren't even in season. So there were lots of things that were not fair. I mean, totally not fair.
And just listening to you describe that, Nancy, it's, you're in the middle of it, right? So having to, like you said, fundraise. I don't think the fundraising has stopped. I think we're all still buying Portese pizzas and all kinds of things for sports in this community to keep things going. But just to get those things going or answer questions, and I can hear it in your voice how frustrating that was to be when you're in the midst of it. When you look back on it, what kinds of things are you really proud of when you see the changes and women in sports today?
Well, I think the ability of the athletes. I mean, there are tons of women athletes when they finally had a chance to perform, and that was exciting. And they performed very well. And my first teams, the ones I would go around to physical education classes or even intramurals and say, I want you on my team. And so we formed some really terrific teams early on.
And so was field hockey the first sanctioned women's athletics at UWSP?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
The basketball program was on. Okay, there
Okay.
was track and field, volleyball. So no, field hockey it had been an event or athletic, it'd been in athletics, since before 1970. Yeah, but it was a club team.
Club team. Okay. Got it. And so tell us a little bit more about what recruiting was like. How did you find athletes?
Well, I don't know. I went to PE classes. I'd pick out good athletes. I'd say, you need to play field hockey. You need to play basketball. And it was just kind of a luck on my part.
Are there any certain athletes that you're especially proud of that we might see in the exhibit?
Oh, sure. Marcy Merman. Marcy Merman was one of my first field hockey players. And she played out her eligibility. And then she went to play tennis. And she excelled on the tennis team. Let me think. Marcia Engebretson. Did any of these people ring a bell to any of you? It's been a long time. But there were a lot of good women athletes who just had never had a chance to participate in organized athletics. And that was fun.
Very cool. I know one of the fun stories you told at the kickoff night was about going on the road. Can you share some of that story about what it was like to go on the road and from a team and being a visiting opponent somewhere?
Well, I drove it was an airport limousine, and I could fit all my players in this vehicle. And one time we drove to Ohio State and we played on Woody Hayes's field, which was just a milestone. I think we won the game also. It was against Ohio State. Early on, the teams I coached, they loved to sing. And so we would be on the road and they would be singing their hearts out the whole time. It was just great. We didn't have money for food. I think we had something like $4 a day to begin with. And so that had to be the budget for, even if we were 3 meals, it was still $4. So, we could get some food. It was a lot different than today. Can't barely get a cup of coffee, but yeah, we struggled with food and lodging. I always had to find the cheapest motels, which can 4 people to a room. That's unheard of these days. But we did it, and we were successful, so it was good.
Nancy, when did you retire from coaching?
Well, I retired from the university in 2004. And I retired partly because I just felt that I was getting too old to coach. And my position was tied in with coaching. So if I quit coaching, I was done. So I just made a decision to retire. So 2004.
2004. So how do you feel like the women's sports transformed over those years? By the time you retired in 2004, what did it start to look like at that point?
Oh, well, it was getting much better. I mean, the budget had increased. I forget who the athletic director was, but it was on the upswing. And I don't know. I mean, it was
Marcy, the Women's Athletic Fund or Foundation, or that group of women, when did that begin to help women's athletics?
Women's Athletic Fund was formed. It was made up of townspeople. They weren't all women. We had 1 or 2 men on the board. And they helped. Well, they helped when we added softball and cross country. They helped kick in money so that we could get those programs going. Otherwise, this was community donations, and it was run through WAF, and they were a lifesaver, really.
It's so interesting. There's so many women, my friends, who benefited from scholarships, sports scholarships that I don't think we existed in this community in the early 70s. But by that 1990s into the 2000s, have we seen more and more women really benefiting from scholarships to attend universities and play sports?
But you have to realize that Division III does not allow scholarships. And we were Division III, so scholarships were not an issue.
Okay.
I mean, we couldn't have them. So once you got into Division II and Division I, of course, that was different. So I don't know, we didn't have any scholarships.
Even in those, that's good to,
I don't think they do anymore. I mean, at this point, they don't.
So even without scholarships, we've seen some pretty incredible women coming out of Portage County. John, Shelly, Nancy, want to talk a little bit about some of those women that we would see in, besides Nancy, that we'll see at the in the exhibit?
Well, on the volleyball field or on the volleyball court, Nancy Shane came into the university pretty soon after Nancy Page came in. And she held that position as well as track and field coach for a great many years until she retired. She'll be in the exhibit for both volleyball and track and field. We'll have our most current, like Roisin Willis, the runner, and we'll have the not so well known, like Margaret. Oh, John, help me. What's her last name?
Margaret Domka.
Yes.
Right.
Who was a soccer standout and went on to the world stage as that.
As a referee.
As a referee. Susie Favor Hamilton, also as an Olympic athlete, and a UW-Madison runner. That, you know, she's promoted in the exhibit, as well as our really, really successful women's or girls teams as a whole.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to add to that too, that as Nancy said, there were some athletic activities prior to Title IX, and we do cover some of those in there too. For example, the first ever basketball game at UWSP was actually a women's intramural game. And it was in 1898, and the final
We have a
score
picture of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have pictures from our archives, and that's where we get to take these cool things we have in our collection and then put them into an exhibit so people can contextualize them and enjoy them and look at them. So we have these different teams throughout, you know, the years, but there's also like a gulf that seemed to take place from, you know, the 1920s up until the 1960s and 70s. So Title IX really did, you know, play a huge role in getting women athletics going. But it's interesting to see these pictures. In case you were wondering, the first basketball game that I mentioned, the final score was a tie of 4-4.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
wow.
a little different.
And speaking of basketball, Janelle McCarville has a whole section of the exhibit. You know, a professional basketball player right from here. So she's been really good to us. She's given us quite a few of her memorabilia, shoes, jerseys, all sorts of things.
Well, that's a great point, Shelly. So beyond photos, what else will people experience at the exhibit?
John, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we have different, like Shelly said, a lot of different athletic equipment that was used by these different players. A great deal of uniforms, and it's really interesting to see how the uniforms have changed over the years, because I don't think any of these uniforms were designed by women for women. I'm just going to say that. It was the early field hockey uniforms are like you had to run in that thing. You know, there's stuff like that. But then there's also stories, you know, there's a good section on the history of the sports bra and how revolutionary that was and controversial. And to think about those things as like, who would have a problem with this? And some people oddly did. And so, you know, telling those stories of how those moments tie into our own local history is a lot of what this exhibit's about, as well as you're going to see different trophies and awards and different, you know, balls and other playing devices and things like that. But it's really, how do these objects help tell the story of these women who really had to go through a lot of just stupid things to be able to play a sport. So
Let me interrupt. Uniforms. Early on, when I first got to Point, the uniforms were passed down from sport to sport. So the first sport was volleyball, and those uniforms were passed down to basketball. And basketball was passed down to track and field. So
Wow.
it was incredible.
Wow. That would never happen today, right?
No,
Of course not.
no. But that is true. And then there were no warm-ups to go with those uniforms. So I wore the same volleyball, the same basketball, and the same track uniform. That was all through my high school years. I was lucky enough to have those sports, but the same uniform and no warm-ups. So
That's right. Right.
So I want to invite people from the audience, if you have a question or you want to, or you have a story to tell, maybe your own women in sports story, go ahead and raise your hand and come off mute and put your video on, and we'd love to hear from you. You can also chat your question if you have one. We can watch that as well. John, while we're waiting to see if there are some questions from the audience, can you tell us a little bit about the logistics of the exhibit, when it open, how long is it scheduled?
yeah, so it's going to be on display. We go through a 2-year cycle on feature exhibits. So the one that we just got done with was World War II in Portage County. And like I said, we rejuvenated our space from that even. So we're really looking forward to inviting people in. The exhibit opening is going to be on the evening of June 1st. And that's also just the kickoff of our summer season out here. Heritage Park is mainly open in the summer, though we're looking to do more in some of these like buffer months in the spring and fall too. It's just not every building has heat. Not every building is well insulated because you're dealing with things that were built in the 1870s and 80s in many cases. So we really hit it hard in the summer. So this summer we're going to be open on Fridays and Saturdays, so people can just come through and browse. But we're also organizing different special events to tie in with the exhibit. So we'll have different speakers, panel discussions. We're looking at doing movie nights for like female sports oriented movies getting into the fall. And so basically you have until the end of summer of 2024 to see this exhibit. And hopefully we'll be open enough so you can have a chance to go in and be flexible enough.
Great. And tell us a little bit about how people can get involved.
Yeah, so we have a link that I can, or what somebody from your team, Jenny, can put in to the chat. This exhibit's a really personal exhibit for, well, anybody who's in it, certainly, but you know, good history is you finding a place of your own in that story. And so to tell those stories, we need your help because we're going off of the sources we have and the people that we've talked to. And the last thing we want to do is exclude somebody whose story is worth including. And so there's an interactive part of the exhibit where you can actually share your own story to us and share any pictures or anything like that with us as well, so that your story can be included in part of the exhibit too. Because what often happens is you open an exhibit and somebody says, oh, I know somebody who, you know, did X, Y, or Z. And then you're like, well, what do we do with that now? And so what we've done because of those experiences is built in actual sections within the exhibit for people to make sure that they are represented as well. So that's one way you can get involved. We also need, oh, I see somebody, yep, I think Kai just put the link in the chat. So take a look at that. We also, you know, being open, we have interns, we have me, and we have a bookkeeper. We are not a large organization at all. And so we are constantly looking for volunteers. We would love to be open more than Fridays and Saturdays, but it's hard to staff those days, frankly. So, you know, the more help we can get from the community, the more we can be open, and the easier it is for us to be able to be telling these stories and showing this stuff off to the public.
Right. And people can just contact you at the Historical Society.
Yep, there's a form on our website that you can fill out. And even if you don't find the volunteer one, you can just send me a note and we can get that ball rolling and stuff. We have a lot of different volunteer opportunities beyond this exhibit, but this certainly, you know, we want to make sure that we are giving a good amount of attention to our feature exhibits when we have those up.
Right. And I don't want you to miss the opportunity. You're also seeking sponsorships and donations to make this
of course.
Correct?
Yeah. The exhibits like this and is not an inexpensive thing to do. Just the printing alone, the costs on those things will blow your mind, but we want this to be, I always look at it because I have a wide institutional background from very large to very small. And I, you know, look at these larger institutions, you know, like State Historical Society on up. And I think we should have that same quality product here in Portage County too. That we shouldn't be shortchanging ourselves just because we're not as big. And to do that, we need to be able to spend money to build our exhibit infrastructure to be able to tell these stories in the way that we're honoring them, not just putting something together with stuff. Yeah, we're of course looking for donations to help get us to that point where I just got back from vacation, so I haven't looked at the most recent total. I want to say we're about 80% of the way there right now. And so if you wanted to help us get across that finish line, sports pun totally intended, you can go to our donation page at our website. And then we also have business sponsorship opportunities that come with some other perks too. So if anybody's interested in any of those kinds of opportunities, please just get in touch with me. And I can add into the chat here when I stop talking how to do that.
Great. Thanks, John. I think it's a great segue too to see some of the pictures that you sent. Kaying, if you want to go ahead and share some of those, like John, Nancy, and Shelly can tell us what oh my goodness, tell us about this.
Well, this is the field hockey team. You can see Marcy Merman in the front, Marcia Engebretson. These are people from Point.
Sheila Mish, isn't that
Yeah,
Sheila on the right?
Sheila
Yep.
Mish.
So that's
Um,
that's you, Nancy, in the white, right?
Yes.
So what year was this taken?
Oh, this had to be, let's see, first year, 1973.
Yeah.
And tell us about like where did you go? I know you mentioned going to Ohio once. How big was the circuit that you would play?
Well, at that time, the field hockey, they were all club teams. And so we would travel to Minnesota. We went to Bemidji. We went to, different places in Minnesota. And we went to Illinois. We also went to Michigan. And we went all over. And I was the driver of the Blue Goose, which was the airport limousine.
Nice. Very good. And what was your record that year?
You expect me to remember that? I don't know, but we, that first year, we did not play a whole lot of games. I think we probably played 12 to 14 games. After that, we played, 20 some or more.
Wow.
We do have a complete field hockey uniform on display at the exhibit.
Yes.
Oh, very fun,
Yep.
Shelly. Is there another picture?
I think the other one I just sent was just the logo for the exhibit.
Okay.
So if you want to flash that up there at some point, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we have a wealth of pictures that have been contributed, and then we have, this is always fun to take things that we have as an organization and then put them into an exhibit, because that's how people can like interact with our resources and actually see what neat things we have. We have the entire photographic collection from the Stevens Point Journal. And so oftentimes we'll find something in a newspaper clipping and I'm like, I wonder what other pictures they took that day. And you can see stuff that, is different angles that didn't get printed, and it's fun to put those into context.
Wow.
Speaking
It's
of the
really-
Stevens Point Journal, I would write up stories on our field hockey games and send it to Don Friday, the sports editor, and they would end up on the society page, not the sports page, the society page, which kind of ticked me off.
Yeah.
So you coached, you refereed, and you wrote the articles.
Yes. Multitask
And drove everyone.
and drove. That's right.
Okay, good. Oh. There
There's-
it is.
Yep.
You just
So those.
wanted to play.
Yep, and those shoes are in the exhibit. So
What kind of shoes are those?
that's a Shelly question. That's
I'm pretty sure that those were track.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
so.
All right. Well, any other questions from the audience?
I see one in the chat.
Oh, there we go. Sam Dinga. Nancy, by the time you retired, were there athletes of color, and what would have been their experience on campus and on the road?
I had one Black athlete, Savante Walker, and I forget what she did, but she was an athlete, but she was also a student of mine in physical education. She's the only one I can remember. The one and only.
Great question, Sam. Sam, did you have any experience of maybe from your time at the university that you saw change for women or women of color athletes? Maybe Sam's not able to come off mute, but a great question, Sam. Very good. Anyone else? Well, we are really grateful that you all, oh, There, Kaylin is jumping.
Hi, Kaylin.
Hi, Shelly. Hi guys. I'm Kaylin Pempek. I'm with the Century Insurance Foundation. So just thank you for sharing the history today. And Nancy, I was thinking about your start and my colleague, my friend over at Century World. Her name is Katie Cruiser, and she's a ladies professional
yes.
golf member, Professional Golf Association member in our pro, and she's actually the coach of the UWSP men's team, golf men's team, and golf women's team. So how far
know
we've
Katie.
come. Wow, isn't she great?
She's super.
So John, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Is there history on women's golf in the exhibit?
There is, yeah.
I thought you mentioned that, and then I thought, well, maybe
Yes.
I heard that just because I was
Yeah. Well, and
thinking
Shelly
it.
can maybe speak more to the different levels of content. We really tried to include as many of the sports as we could, that we could find evidence of. And this is kind of where this share your own story stuff comes in, where it's like, if you think we missed something, please submit it, because we want to make sure we're representing that. I mean, Amherst had great bowling teams. And so, and that's something that I don't think people always like think of as a sport. And so, but absolutely. So golf and some of these other sports that aren't track and field or basketball or larger team sports are also represented.
Very good. Great question, Caitlin. Just from Century World's perspective, like, have you watching golf really take off? Because I believe Century World started around this same time,
40 years ago.
40 years ago in the 80s, and just how much that's really changed in our community. I don't know. I know you're not a golf expert, but is there any insights here that you could share?
Jenny.
That you would hope to see in the exhibit. How about that?
I haven't thought about it until I was listening. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to see what it looked like when it started in Portage County. I've been with Century for 3 years, and certainly am just a casual golfer myself, but I'm learning so much more about the sport and about just the kind of the traits of the players, the golfers themselves, really just focused on integrity and leadership and just like the traits of the individual athlete. Anyway, so I can't answer that right now, but I'm going to follow up with John on that.
Well, thanks for letting me put you on the spot. It does remind me, Kaylin, too, of something that's really touched me personally about this exhibit is so many of my friends from high school softball just changed their lives. I was in art and music, and I didn't play softball. But some of them went on to do really cool things as a result of being able to play and have really good coaches. Don, I think that's another part of this story, right? It's the men and women both, maybe, who you were going to see some exhibits on people that coached. Is that right?
Yeah, Shelly, if you want to touch more on who's in the exhibit.
We have the high school coaches who have consistently in Portage County created girls teams that have, been so successful over the course of many, many years. We have a coaches section of the exhibit where they are highlighted and their teams are highlighted both in video and in print. We have coaches from the university that they actually, coaches like Nancy, who would transcend not only a trailblazer, but be that coach, have a section in the coaches section of the exhibit. There's just such a depth of good exhibit material for female athletes, men and women coaches of female teams. And we had a ridiculously hard time paring down to fit into our exhibit space. So yes, we do cover coaches as well.
Very good. Well, anything else you'd like to highlight?
I can just go unless Nancy or Shelly has anything else they want to say.
You go ahead, John.
Okay, I really hope that people can come out and see the exhibit, and like I said, I hope they find a piece of themselves in there and come to appreciate what the struggle has been and continues to be for women athletes, not just in our county but throughout our country. And so you know, this, I think, when you like do a class on how to create an exhibit in a community effort behind these things, I think that this is a textbook example of how to do this totally right. And I credit a lot to the committee, which Shelly's a part of and Sue Kale is the leader of really, this is a grassroots effort to pull this thing together, to tell, like I said at the beginning, the story of you. And so to bring that personal aspect, this isn't some abstract person from the 1850s who came here on, you know, an oxen. And that those stories are super important too. But I think there's a certain amount of connectivity with this exhibit and the issues within it that I hope will really resonate with people. And so that they'll start to think of our history, not as something that's like static and way far back in the past, but as something that's currently evolving and something that we're constantly trying to find new ways to tell these stories so that these things don't get lost to time.
They transcend, this exhibit transcends age. So like my granddaughter's coming. I know that Nancy's granddaughter will be there, and I hope many granddaughters and children and teenagers of all ages. It just, the exhibit of athletics transcends that age barrier.
Ying, did you have a question? I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I would love to hear about the recruiting process, how, like, trying to get more women of athlete at your time, Nancy, who may not be as confident or certain about seeing themselves as athletes.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I guess I can imagine there might be women who are eager to play volleyball or basketball, but maybe you need more women to form a team. What was the process like trying to get that team together or invite women to play?
Well, in the early years of field hockey, I would just go around and to different events and pick out good athletes. I would say, I think you'd be a good field hockey player. Why don't you come out to the field? And, you know, they would love it. So I don't know about volleyball and basketball. I think that early on, those sports were really just getting started in high schools too. So the logical step then would be to come to the university.
Great, another great story. I think this is going to be really a fun exhibit to hear stories of Nancy's and others. And I'm really glad that we got to add a second community lunch hour this month during Women's History Month to be able to share and talk about this really fun exhibit. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Next month, we are going to continue the theme of women's leadership. And the Women's Fund of Portage County, Sue Schulfer, Mary Patoka, and Kelly Coughlin are going to join us to share about the Women's Fund 25-year history, as well as their bright future. They just completed a pretty extensive strategic plan to really help you know, see where the Women's Fund goes into the future. So that is going to be on April 10th, Monday, April 10th at noon. So we hope you can join us for that. And yeah, and look for an email from us later this week with some links that John talked about, as well as the YouTube video